So, hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here in Sri Lanka with my friend Venerable Bhante Gnanasumana. And Bhante asked me to just say a few words about myself and maybe give a very short explanation of mindfulness for the group that's meeting. And so I became a monk in 2010 at a monastery in the Thai tradition in Canada. And before that, got into Buddhism in high school and kind of started practicing in the Zen tradition. I just basically Googled Buddhism Toronto and a Zen temple came up. It was my kind of good fortune that there was a place that was English speaking where I could go to practice meditation. And so after staying there for a few years, started to think that might be a bit inclined towards Theravada, and it was my kind of good fortune that at that time there was a monastery that was opening up in Ottawa. Actually been open for about a year. And actually right now still that's the only place where you can, it was my very good fortune, that's the only place where you can ordain in the English language in the Theravada forest tradition in Canada. Hopefully more in the future, maybe more in the future, but right now that's where you can. So it was my great good fortune that it had opened up. And so after staying there, I stayed there for about 6 years total. You usually spend 1 year keeping the 8 precepts as an anagarika, and then another year keeping 10 precepts as a samanera. And if you still kind of like it, then you can go forth as a monk. And so after going forth and stayed there for a few more years, and then my teacher sent me to Thailand for a year of training in a Buddhist country, which is where I met Bhante Gnanasumana. And it's been nice to reconnect here in Sri Lanka after several more years. And so I think you asked me to speak a little bit about my mindfulness, and probably in Western countries, kind of Canada, state, England, all kind of European influence countries. Right now there's kind of growing interest in meditation. And a lot of this might come from particular cultural elements in the West. It's basically people are looking for a way to find happiness. It's kind of actually with technology advancing at the rate it is, material wealth in Western countries is much greater, maybe than at any point in recorded human history. Greater than the greatest pharaohs, greater than maybe the greatest emperors of China or of Rome. But even with all this kind of material wealth, people are sometimes quite unhappy. Actually, I remember coming back from the monastery to Toronto after staying there for a while, and they had all these signs up on the subway like, please don't commit suicide. And they had these suicide help phones. And actually, I'd been on a subway train where somebody had jumped in front of it. And so this is kind of a growing problem in the West, that despite having huge amounts of material wealth, huge amounts of material success, almost nobody in Canada, you don't find people who are starving really. People have huge amounts of access to information, can go anywhere they want with a car, or with a train, with the bus, whatever they want. People are still dissatisfied, still unhappy. And so it's for this reason that people, I think in the West, at least myself, or many people who grow up in the West and become monks, turn to the Buddha's teachings. They want to find a way to be happy. Kind of searching for material wealth didn't do it, so maybe there's another way. And so it's for this reason that perhaps mindfulness now is becoming very popular in the West. And people aren't maybe 100% ready to jump into the Buddhist life totally, but even this simple technique of just being what we call mindfulness now, but which basically gets translated as being in the present moment, does a lot to relieve people's anxieties, does a lot to relieve people's fears. And there's a reason for this. It's just partially because in the West there was this kind of emphasis on reason for some time. And with this emphasis on reason, thinking got elevated in the Western consciousness really high. So whenever a problem arose, okay, let's think it through, think about it, ruminate on it. And of course there are ways that this is good. But this aspect of always using this thinking mind can have side effects. Always thinking all the time, the hamster's always running on the wheel. Then a worry comes up about the future. It's hard to stop the mind from thinking about that. And kind of regret comes up about the past. It's hard to stop the mind from thinking about the past. In other words, with all this thinking, just constantly thinking, too much, overthinking, over ruminating, then the mind becomes a bit like a kind of untrained dog or an untrained horse. In other words, whatever smell it smells, it just runs out to the smell. You kind of can't rein it in. You know, whatever it sees, it runs after that. Maybe it even starts chasing after cars sometimes, doing things that are dangerous, you know, because it's not trained, it's not reined in, it's just used to going wherever it wants. And so for this reason, when a person learns to train their mind to just stay in the present moment, not to think, just to be with whatever they're doing in the present moment, which is what the Buddha calls sati sampajana, this is actually like a balm that's healing a kind of wound in perhaps Western consciousness at this time, which is maybe a bit too much thinking, a bit over ruminating, a bit over worrying about the future, a bit over regretting the past, a bit overthinking. And so when one learns to stop thinking so much, to come back to the present moment, the mind has a chance to settle down. The mind has a chance to feel at ease. And this is a type of ease that people don't get to experience necessarily through constantly thinking, through constantly chasing after cravings, through constantly trying to get the next car or the next house or the, for whatever it might be that's outside of oneself that one's trying to run after, that one's trying to ruminate about, that one's trying to think about how much they want. When one learns to put all these things down, then the mind has a chance to settle, and people have a chance to feel a type of ease that they may not have felt before. That's kind of one of the reasons maybe why people in the West do drugs, is to have their mind settle down. You take this kind of marijuana or Percocet or whatever it might be, and at last the mind is a little bit quiet. But we don't have to turn to drugs for this kind of thing. This kind of thing can be, peace of the mind doesn't require an external drug to make the mind still. We can learn to train our mind to be still. We can learn to train our mind to be at ease. And this is the liberating thing about the Buddhist teachings that's now been penetrating the Western consciousness, is that we have a choice. We have a choice to make our mind peaceful or to make our mind ill at ease. And more when we learn to come back to the present moment, to stay with what we're doing, we learn to see that there's a peace that's here that doesn't necessarily depend on having the biggest house or the fastest car, doesn't necessarily depend on having the latest promotion. What it depends on is our willingness to direct our mind towards wholesome things, to direct our mind towards the present moment, and to try to find a peace that's within. And so those are a few thoughts on mindfulness. What we call mindfulness right now, basically just this technique of just staying in the present moment. The Buddha called it sati sampajana. His word sati had a different meaning, but we can say this sati sampajana, just learning to settle the mind, to come back to the present moment. A whole lot of peace can be found in that. But this type of peace is like, it's like if somebody was doing a bit of mining, kind of, digging, and they came across a small gem, like this size. That peace is like that. It's like the peace that comes from this small gem. But if a person keeps digging, they might find an entire vein of gold. They might strike it rich. They might get enough wealth that they don't have to work again. But that's enough. When a person learns to dig a little bit, when they find one gem, they get the idea that there might be more to see, more that's beneath the surface, more to dig up, more to discover. And that's how it is with the Buddha's teachings. That's how it is with mindfulness. It's a good place to start to find peace, but there's much, much more that the Buddha teaches is available. There's much, much more that's possible, because for people who dig down in the Buddha's teachings, for people who strike this vein of gold, for people who strike it rich, they don't have to suffer again. And there's no goal that's higher than that.